Right, so I was thinking of clearing up some confusion about BLM. I know some people might already know this, but it's worth referencing. BLM does not really care about blacks, even according to their own statements. This is something you should know if you want to support this movement.
A number of people have reached out, including a political prisoner, Jalil Muntaqim, who has written from behind the prison walls, trying to reach out to Black Lives Matter activists and others. And one of the critiques that he shared, a loving critique, as I would want to point out, by the way, is that he was concerned, or is concerned, that there's a lack of perhaps ideological direction in Black Lives Matter that would allow it to fizzle out, as he said, in comparison to Occupy Wall Street. As you are advanced in your own organization, as you all are headed to Cleveland to participate in this Black Lives Movement conference, how do you respond to that particular critique? Again, a loving critique from an elder of the struggle that some others share, that I've even shared as well, to be frank, as a concern about, in part because of the co-optation and the appropriation, that a more clear ideological structuring might be of some value here. But how do you respond to those kinds of, again, loving criticisms?
I think that the criticism is helpful. I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories. And I think that what we really try to do is build a movement that could be utilized by many, many Black folk. We don't necessarily want to be the vanguard of this movement. I think we've tried to put out a political frame that's about centering who we think are the most vulnerable amongst the Black community to really fight for all of our lives. And I do think that we have some clear direction around where we want to take this movement. I don't believe it's going to fizzle out. It just gets stronger, and we see it, right? We've seen it after Sandra Bland. We're seeing it now with the interruption of the Netroots Nation Presidential Forum. What I do think, though, is folks, especially folks who've been trained in a particular way, want to hear certain things from us that we're not sort of framing it in the same ways that maybe another generation has. But I think it's important that people know that we are the Black Lives Matter movement doesn't just live online. Although there's many people who utilize it online, we're in a different set of circumstances, a different generation that social media may feel like it's diluting sort of the larger ideological frame, but I argue that it's not.
No, I think that's very well said, very well taken, understood. And as, speaking for myself, it was just an intent or a desire to encourage that it not fizzle out. So I'm glad to hear you saying that, and I'm happy that there appears to be much more going on than some of us are aware of, particularly those who are, again, politically incarcerated, as is Jalil Muntaqim. One last question, if I could, real quick. There has been some controversy in some circles over the definition of Black. Could you say a word or two about how you conceive the term Black and what you mean when you say Black Lives Matter?
Black to me is both about a race that's been constructed, but it's also a political statement. It's a political framework. And I think it's important as we are building out this movement for Black liberation that we in the Black Lives Matter movement allow for necessary debate to come up around how we use the term and who's using the term and when it's used and why it's an important point to sort of build people together. And I think it's specifically important when it comes to how the US is very clever at turning other groups white, right? And making them white. And we've seen that throughout history when groups were not white and when the white power structure was threatened, they figured out a way to make groups white. And I think as we move forward, we have to figure out political alignments that hold Blackness as a broader framework than just sort of the skin we're in, but as a political statement.
Patrisse Cullors, thank you very much for joining us in this.
The text on the screen isn't necessarily my text. That's just part of the video or the video version that I managed to find. That particular person is Patrisse Cullors. That is one of the 3 top organizers of BLM. This was in an interview where she also admitted that her political framework was identical to Marxism. So, if her political framework is identical to Marxism, and being Black is judged based on your political framework, then the political framework of being Black makes Black synonymous with being a communist according to the definitions of BLM. So when you read their political message boards and their about page and everything else that they ever publish, when they say we're things like, unapologetically Black, to them being Black doesn't just mean the skin color, it also means the political identity that they hold for black people, which is communist. This is why if you are black and you support the country, if you support the flag, if you support anyone who is beholden to what they quote-unquote call whiteness, which is also defined in a lot of books like, critical race theory, then you're not really seen as black, right? You're seen as an Uncle Tom, you're seen as a coon, you're seen as, all these other racial slurs that they try and throw at you. It's not actually because you are betraying your race, it's because based on the framework that BLM lays out, you cannot support the country and also be black. Like, being black is a political identity that is separate from being quote-unquote white, and America is quote-unquote white, and black is quote-unquote not non-white, which means not supporting of the quote-unquote system that is America. So then you expand this based on everything that they say and the rest of their movements, and you extrapolate this very key difference and defining phrase to everything else that they present themselves into the world, and it actually makes far more sense when they do the things that they do. It makes sense, say, that they protest for a black person who runs at the cops with a knife and then gets shot, because to them, America, being defined as white, has no reason to enforce laws against anyone who is quote-unquote defined as black, because black is defined as a political identity that is separate from being white. There's also, on their Movement for Black Lives page, which is the political processing wing of basically all the political things that they want done, they also say that they want to not just abolish all jails, but release all political prisoners. If you take that definition key distinction, that means that if you're black and you're arrested by America, you're technically, to BLM, a political prisoner, which means you should automatically be released. Now, I shouldn't have to explain the utter atrocity that will happen to black people if you release every single black person from prison and then abolish the police. However, and I'll probably get into this later, the people like Patrisse Cullors, Alicia Garza, Opal Tometi, they don't care. Like, they don't care. And the reason they don't care is because they're rich and they don't have to worry about any of this shit, because they don't live in the ghetto. So I hear a lot as well, because I try and engage with other people with political perspectives. I hear a lot as well of people who are talking about, like, how BLM is incredibly anti-white, and it is incredibly anti-white, but for this particular instance, I did want to point out that I don't think BLM will be good for anyone. I don't even think BLM will be good for blacks, because their policies are just so nuts, and no one should ever believe in them. But unfortunately, a lot of people get whirlpooled into this movement thinking that it's just about blacks, or it's just about black lives. But if you take their pretty key distinction about what black life actually means, it doesn't actually mean black life, because black life also comes with a political framework, and that political framework is largely defined by Black Lives Matter, not by any standard black person. I doubt this will get out to an insane amount of people, but hopefully, for those who watch it, you at least see where this is going, because it is a manipulation of terms what they're doing when they say Black Lives Matter. That's why they can go out and shoot somebody like David Dorn. That's why they can go out and shoot the 8-year-old black child that they did and not really flinch, because black life to them doesn't actually mean black life. Like, it means something completely different. And when black life starts to suffer from Black Lives Matter, well, if you don't have the correct political framework, then you don't really make a difference, or you don't really matter. It is elaborate. I think that even the people who oppose BLM kind of had this sixth sense about what they're really saying. But I mean, if you look for any hard proof or any serious proof of what they mean when they say black life, I mean, you can just listen to them. They even say they don't mean black life when they say black lives. So I hope people are not fooled, but a lot of people seem to be.